All right, good evening, guys. Welcome to the initial episode. We're calling this episode 0 of the Blue Horseshoe Club. We've collected a shadowy cabal of space billionaires and mic'd up their cigar club. We're here to capture and share their discussions about economic and meta progress of EVE Online. In this episode 0, our pilot, we're looking to make this a once per month show. The goal is to capture some of the BS and discussions that might happen in the circles of the scc-lounge, EVE Prosper, K162 Space, all the other market discussion forums, and serve them up to you guys in a friendly atmosphere of a country club. We'll rotate guests as we can, so don't expect the list to stay exactly the same week over week, month over month. But we're looking to get market movers and shakers here to discuss the topics of pertinence and how they make their money and all that other great space money stuff. So this month, words. I'm used to the EVE Prosper cadence. So this month we have collected Caleb Ayrania from the scc-lounge.
Yeah, hi again. I'm everywhere these days. Sorry.
Rhivre, who's also in this scc-lounge and is becoming a major contributor over at TMC.
Hey.
And Marsha Mallow, who I was only just introduced to this last couple of weeks, but is also joining us from everywhere, according to the notes here.
Hello.
So, in case people haven't heard of you, I guess we can start with Caleb here at the top of the list. What do you do? Where do people know you from? What's your sort of space history? And just a few minute introduction, just so we can get to know you.
Well, I founded the lounge in '09, and then I've basically been catering to the meta stuff for the MD ever since. And my history goes back a little bit further, and there's a special episode on EVE history on Talking in Station where I talk more of this. So
cool, and it's great to have you on here. Fans of the EVE Prosper show will know that you drop by every once in a while, and we have long discussions about all of the market stuff.
It's when you don't show up at the country club.
Yeah. Next is Rhivre, who some of you may know, some of you might know. I know she tends to hide a little more in the shadows these days. Can you tell everybody where they might know you from and what you do these days?
Yeah, mostly I'm found in the scc-lounge in-game, just generally trying to make it a friendly place for people to hang out and talk about trade. Other than that, I'm usually just jumping into markets that have been manipulated in JITA and trying to make as much ISK as I can before they collapse again. I've also been on the Talking in Stations the last couple of weeks to talk about market stuff.
Excellent. And then last in our guest list, Marsha, where might players know you from, and what have you done in your space history?
Mine's quite historical. I mean, I started playing in 2008, and I was quite involved with market discussions for them. I used to invest a lot. My character was Phoebe Halliwell then. And then I took over a bond for blueprint copying called Unstop Mining, and it had an alliance attached to it that was public research slots, so I ran that with a different alt. And I've done all manufacture across the board and station trading and stuff like that, seeding markets.
Oh, can I butt in and say that that's another example of someone getting their business destroyed by CCP intervention, because after Krios, then everyone could get as many slots as they liked.
Yeah, to be fair, I'd taken it down actually in 2012 because Goonswarm War Deck to Unstop as part of Burn Jita, so I took it all down. So when Krios hit, it didn't bother me. But more recently, I do a lot of passive ISK making, so I do character trading, or I did up until the change. Now I'm doing SP trading and just general station trade.
Excellent. And then I am your host today. That's Lockefox. You might know me from the EVE Prosper show, occasionally making noise on the Hydrostatic show, and generally bitching and wailing about Plex prices and how much I hate VAT taxes.
Did you just trigger yourself?
I totally triggered myself. So let's go ahead and move on to our first major section of the show. We're going to call this Around the Horn until we come up with a better name for it. Going to go around the table again, just sort of chiming in what you guys have been doing for the last month, what your plans are that are currently in action, how you guys are enjoying the the Citadel expansion, how things are generally going. So, do we want to start with Caleb again, or do we want to go in reverse order?
No, we can start with Caleb.
Well, I've not been doing that much because I've been so swamped with the fact that nothing is where it's supposed to be or working as it's supposed to work. So I've been trying to take advantage of the movements, of course, but they've just been overwhelming me a bit because I can't really keep up with anything. It's like I had a few very nice orders of minerals up out of the way, and I thought that was going to last me forever, just trickling into the economy and giving me a really nice profit, and then someone just bought it all up because the prices changed. So the mineral price changes and the raw materials in general have just confused me so much. So I'm just kind of in a holding pattern, and with all the other stuff that we're going to touch upon later, I'm just waiting right now.
Interesting. Yeah, it's sure been a wild patch season for sure. I've been unfortunately the swings you're talking about, I haven't seen as many of the bigger ones. That first Citadel week though was amazing and broke like everything.
Yeah, and I think we're not even in the beginning of this because people have just now seemed to realize that this is going to have a huge impact. And if you notice some of the volumes traded of items that used to have only half the volume, we're going to be expecting a lot of change. So I must say that I've been trying to creep into some of the holes in the market and trying to just snatch up a few of the things that haven't moved yet or people have been ignoring. I have this addiction to meta items. I must admit that. I keep getting jokes with being a hoarder, but I like to have those things and then just write off the actual expenses because they don't cost that much, and then suddenly something can move very fast.
What about you, Rhivre? What have you been doing since the patch hit, and what sort of actions have you been doing?
Well, on patch day, I got rid of all the Tech 2 salvage and the P4 planetary interaction stuff that I bought back in November, December. So yeah, that was what I did on patch day, and since then I've just been diving in on the new items that have come onto the market because the prices haven't settled yet, so there's really big margins on them. So yeah, I've just been flipping those when the prices, when I can get a buy order filled, and then just trying to capitalize on the current volatility in the markets.
Definitely.
Not to mention the return of investment. I think you hit what, 50-70%?
76% on the P4 and Tech 2 salvage, but because I had a load of other stuff in the basket as well, some of that went down. For some reason I had isotopes and heavy water in there that I can't remember why I put that in there, but that went down. But the rest of them went up enough to give me a 76% return on it.
That's amazing.
That could have been my fault, but it's the rule that we always blame Locke if there's anything going wrong with our investment.
Absolutely. My forecasting is definitely as good as a weatherman in Colorado.
Well, also I mistimed jumping out on strontium. I bought strontium at 500 per unit, and when it hit 1500, I decided that I should jump out. And then, as we know, strontium is now about 5,000 per unit.
Yeah, that strontium market I ate so much foot on that because I would have done exactly the same thing. I was not expecting it to go up to 4 or 5k a unit, like a 10x price increase.
Yeah, I thought that when it was at 1500, it wouldn't go any higher, so I dumped out. I got 3 times the amount back that I put in, so it's not bad. But yeah, if I'd have held on to it, it would have been much nicer.
It was kind of the same with, or in the opposite direction with nanite paste that I was actually poking Marsha about way back, and I was expecting it to move a lot faster and get into the new price compared to productivity and production cost, but it's not been moving at all really. It's just slowly ticking up there. So maybe I've been underestimating how much volume was there, but yeah, it's not been moving yet. But the fighters did. Just want to say that.
Yeah, the fighter market's been hilarious.
I did take a tip from somebody about 3 weeks ago I think it was about a month ago actually, on P4s. P4s are going to go up on patch day, so I bought a load. And then as soon as I bought them, I think it was wetware mainframes, I bought them at like 2,800 a unit. And then a week later, they dropped to 2,300. And I thought, because I'm absolutely terrible at holding, so I just sold them. And then another week later on, as it was coming up to patch day, they went through the roof.
I almost did the same thing with fighters, if you remember. I kept saying fighters are going to go crazy, fighters are going to go crazy, and they didn't move at all. They kept below build cost, and I was going, am I wrong? Am I wrong? And I was just about to actually sell, and then I said, okay, fuck it, if they don't move, I don't care. And then I just left them, and then I left them a little bit too low in price, because I think I lost about potentially 50% more markup on my investment, so, well, but it got home.
I think it just shows, even if you've got a tip and you're watching the market really closely, you have to have the patience, and even experts lose patience occasionally because what they predict is going to happen doesn't.
Well, I think it's also to do with the fact that one of the things that I've noticed many times, that people are really slow to pick up on the changes that have already been announced and that's been spread between all the people following it and speculating, and we expect them to see these things a lot faster, or at least not that late, and then we sit there with our patient thing and, are we wrong? Have we overestimated? And then suddenly everyone reads the news or figure out how the patch is actually working, and then they come in and buy the stuff.
Yeah, Caleb has a great point. So if you roll the clock back maybe 2 or 3 years, I have been raised on this. You trade on the news, and the day that a dev blog comes out, the market will go nuts and it'll reset. So like, if you want to go back to the most recent one I remember was the Recon rebalance, which I know a bunch of my buddies actually got into, because it's like everything else has been tier aside except for recons, and recons need to be done. So I'm just going to buy them and I'm going to forget about them. Just put them in a crate. Don't even worry about it. And the news comes out and the recon prices go bananas. They go up 50%, and then producers start coming in and they slip underneath the line where they even started. And then you saw these huge waves as they went up and down as speculators got in and out of the market. By the time the patch actually hit some 4 weeks later, then there was not, like, the prices didn't change at all, because all of the action had been played out ahead of time. And I've seen this pattern 100 times. Like, we saw it with Odyssey when they changed Technetium. We saw it. I can pull up graphs for days about this kind of stuff, and so I've been using that as an operating thing. But this last year, I don't know if there's just too much news and nobody's reading it, if the market discussion guys have all gone dormant and everything's just moving slower than usual. But like, for instance, the PI markets was one I had said 2 weeks ahead of the patch to get out, because you count your money and you get out of there, because I expected everyone to have stockpiles already. It's not news. It's not interesting. It's been in the news for 6 frickin' months. I expected day zero to just have this flood of PI come to the market, and I was dead wrong. We saw the spike go up, and then I ate a bunch of shoe about making a bad prediction and only making 20% for my people instead of 40%. So it's been a very weird year market news-wise.
Yeah, you're going to get shoe sole constipated with all this eating shoes. But the point is that it's these market earthquakes, and they tie into exactly what you pointed out, that there's been too much information. And then, of course, the speed of the news cycle, I think, has a lot of impact on the volatility of the markets, because we can't really get all the information, or we can't consume all the information. So in the past, you used to have these big changes, and you could follow the CSM talks, or you could see what other people were doing, and the really long speculators that had actually expected what these big patches would change. But now it's a slower trickle, so I think there's more fear in the market too, and the Citadel thing is just explosive.
Well, I think that what Locke was saying about the pre-patch stuff that happened, I mean, I was watching the FanFest stream, so I hopped on the triage modules when they mentioned it in there. I mean, I already knew they were being changed to fax. Carriers would be changed to fax on patch day, but I knew that a lot of people watching the stream wouldn't, and so I hopped on triage modules on the day that it was announced at FanFest, and I did 13 items that I bought and then resold, and from those 13 items I made 916 million profit off of triage module 1s.
Yeah, and that was even weird too, because that ramp started the week before the FanFest streams, and I saw the blip originally, and I'm like, oh, a bunch of people just heard about the news recently, and this should be up and done by the end of the week. I didn't tell anybody to buy into it because I really expected, when I took the snapshot the first time, that we were at the top, and like I always assume that producers are going to see anything with decent margin and destroy it. And then we got in the FanFest streams, and the price just kept ticking up because it was news to way more people than I thought. And I again keep overestimating that it might be a faction that there's just too much news that we're seeing. We've gone from we've accelerated the cadence over and over and over again, and now we're at this like incredible fever pitch of information, especially ahead of Citadel, that people just weren't able to keep up, and they may have just been focused on, okay, I need to care about this because I fly these ships, and we want a Citadel, so I need to make sure we have enough for our large or whatever, and all the rest of the news, whatever. I'm out of brain horsepower at this point.
Yeah, I mean, on the day of the stream, I was buying at 75 million. The highest I bought for was 90 million, and I was selling it up to 245 million for triage modules.
Yeah, and it also ties into the thing that I've been talking with Marsha about, what we could kind of talk about looking at and getting into, and it always ends up in this connectivity stuff, like what is this going to touch on except for the change, right? So what's the trickle down effects? And one of the things that really confused me is that then when you get the war on top of that and everyone starts changing doctrines, then everything is up in the air, and that's basically why I've been kind of leaving the market alone a little bit.
I think you might be right that there's so many opportunities that there are huge gaps starting to appear that people are just not taking advantage of. But because we know, I know when there's a big patch due, that like these old style huge patches, not just a mini patch, that people will start investing and putting big orders in a month out before even any announcements are made. They're already making the guesses, and it depends where they are in the chain as to what they actually hit. So by the time the releases come through, either via patch notes or even earlier at FanFest announcements, a lot of people are already fully invested. They don't have that much liquidity left. So what you see in the wave afterwards, like semi-professional traders who've picked it up from the wider sort of grapevine, there's different tiers of people, and I think the very, very smart speculators don't really talk to anybody about what they're actually investing in, and they do it really early.
Yeah, that's the big numbers, but the big investments in people's speculation and portfolios. But I'm thinking more about the small responsive things that maybe most traders will have a little bit of a harder time actually figuring out. Like, I've taken a little bit of a chance on something, and I don't know if this show is now going to make that explode. But if I'm not mistaken, one of the only defenses properly against fighters is going to be smart bombs. So this should spread out in more than just the traditional utility of large smart bombs. You have to do something against all this splash damage that's going to be on fields. And I'm not an FC, so I don't know exactly what they're going to use to counter these things. But that's one of the things that I was guessing and then putting a bit of money into.
Well, and I mean, to talk about long-term, short-term, I mean, the long-term guys who want to do the long speculation, who were bought in at Eve Vegas after the Citadel stuff had been announced, and the sort of stuff where you're looking to make some bigger bet about things, like you're about sinking a lot of money and making a return of something in like the 10 or 15% range, because then your money has done work. Whereas the sort of small blips I keep seeing that keep confounding me are these flash mobs that jump up on a thing, and you're like, if you jumped in on it and you'd done sort of the traditional thing, you would have said, oh, here's a piece of news. Like, if you'd bought into triage modules, you could have bought into triage modules up to a month ahead of FanFest and known what they were going to do and been reasonably secure in your investment and made your 10% on patch day, no problem. But this sort of snowball effect of, wait a minute, I didn't understand that. Did you understand that? Did he know about that? Oh crap, we need to make sure we have faxes on day zero. I hadn't even thought about that. And now that the stuff's actually here, Now we have this run, and we instead going up 10 or 15%. We're going up 20, 25, 30% in this sort of flash rush that I don't think you can really predict more than a few days ahead of it. Like the higher the swing, the less resolution you have ahead of time.
This could also be tied to people liquidating Plex stockpiles, which we've been looking at for a long time. I mean, we've been discussing why Plex is so volatile at the moment. One of the things that's come up is it could be that these sort of speculative traders that are not actually professional traders, they've bought into Plex because other people have told them to, and it's been a gold standard for a long time, are basically panic selling out, and they've been told about these other markets. I mean, some of these opportunities are fairly well known now, so they're jumping into them later than we would normally expect.
And it seems as if they are getting into those markets slightly with doing the dart on a board thing, just guessing when they're doing their diversification. It's like, this might be something, let's put it there.
I mean, my entire trading is based on jumping in and jumping out of flash movements on markets. You just have to get incredibly lucky when you open the market 5-10 minutes after someone's emptied it out for some reason, and then there's the really crazy returns, but you can't really predict that sort of stuff in advance.
And so I guess this is a good transition point. We're going to go ahead and move on to our next section because that Plex thing is just too juicy not to jump onto. We're going to do the topic du jour, and we're actually doing a few topics to sort of work our way through because we were having some great pre-show conversations. First, let's start with that Plex thing, and the post-Citadel, the map went completely nuts. Like, so we've been in this period of decline, and we can talk at pretty long length about analyzing why that decline is here, and we've done that on 100 other shows, so I'd rather not dig too deep into that. But the flash crashes, I found two things interesting. One, on patch day, that it went so low so fast, which smells to me of somebody not understanding the tax news or people panicking. But then we saw a rerun of the exact same behavior on Friday night as the weekend warriors came home to start their trades.
Yeah, and again, this ties into the whole thing that Rhivre has tried to explain so many times, right? If you look at that crash on Plex, half of the volume is Probag, right?
For buys, yeah, he's driving the Plex wall. Like, go Google the Plex wall. We can discuss a little bit about it, but we're not going to go into technicalities on this show. We've covered it 100 times. But if we're going to talk about the effect of that Plex wall, I think that the general amateur investor doesn't understand what manipulation really means, in that Probag's Plex wall is more about setting a floor and catching up every cheap Plex that falls to that floor, more than trying to drive the price to a place, because he can only control the buy orders.
Yeah,
and
but
if he sets his floor too low,
panicking on the volume, right? They were panicking on the fact that it looked as if there was a lot of trades being dumped to market, when it was basically just him clearing his escrow, right?
Well, yeah. So that's the technicality on Wednesday, and that absolutely is part of the picture there. But the fact that that we saw the rerun of the same behavior on Friday, when Probag should not have been doing any Plex washing at that point.
I mean, for me, the Plex crash and the volatility in Plex on patch day wasn't really anything to do with Probag. It was more that there was the tax change, so suddenly people were unsure about the buy orders, and then there was the bugs and that on patch day. But also people had bought the BPOs or saved up the ISK for the BPOs for the Citadels. And I know of people that had forgotten that Citadels need modules and rigs and things like this. And so then they had to liquidate some of their Plex that they'd been holding to be able to afford the BPOs that they'd overlooked in their planning.
Yeah, and that comes back to the cash crunch, is that it's the same root cause we've been seeing all of this Plex down pricing going for, is that We saw it start going down because skill trading came in and everybody wanted to move their cash from Plex into skill trading to go participate in that market. And then World War B starts and people need to cash out Plex to either fight or hire people for things or whatever they need cash for. They needed that more than they needed Plex. And then we see that again with Citadel, that Citadel launches, and you not only had people buying the blueprints they knew they needed and they knew how much they wanted, but also panicking because, oh crap, I also need 20% more ISK than I originally set aside because I need the additional blueprints, or I didn't get all of the materials and I still need cash. And so that's why we see ourselves under $1 billion, is that this clamoring need for just so much cash to be able to participate in these markets and not just sit on your wealth in Plex means that a lot of Plex are moving around and cycling through the market as people buy them up and sell them out, and it's causing people to get panicked. And then the tax change means that we're going to have a much wider margin between buy and sell than we've historically seen. And that probably led people who look at their spreadsheets all day to go, oh God, it's going down. This buy-sell spread went from 1% to 4%. That's a downward trend. Oh God, sell everything.
And then, of course, all the tool warriors, right? Because things like the margin tools needed to pick up this new patch and the new trend, and the fact that almost everything ended up in some sort of negative margins, right? So there was a lot of chaos in the way that traders usually behave.
I think that as well, I've seen there's been some strange behavior. I think people are still nervous because I've seen there was a mini crash on Plex the other day where someone had set up some some sell orders in the other JITA 4.4. And people just followed it. And I've seen it a couple of times where someone's come in and put a sell order up 30 million below the current sale price. And instead of a trader buying it out and flipping it, which is what would normally happen, people have just followed it down. And so you've ended up with a mini crash on most days because of just people not behaving as they normally did.
I think there's definitely an element of panic selling, because when you log into game and talk to people that have got Plex stockpiles and they've been sat on them for a year or however long, they were all sort of saying, should I sell now? Is it going to drop any further? Is it going to drop below 800 million? You know, they've been winding each other up in general chat channels, and they're just going and just panic dumping everything. But to be fair, there was also a lot to be bought with this patch. There's a lot of SP that people will have wanted to inject. You know, the things like the new fighters, the T2 fighters, capital ships. If there was a chart released by Quant, I think last week, or it might be the week before, just showing how much SP was injected with Citadels. And the second one I noticed, or it might have been the third highest, was actually cybernetics. And what I thought was interesting about that, the character farming market's not particularly mature. I don't know many people that are doing it in large numbers. They're doing enough to sub their accounts, but they're not doing it for large scale profit. And because the profits have been so high for that, now people are quite confident about it. They're about to enter the market. So the quickest way to do it is to go out, inject new alts, or inject alts that you don't really use, but you need your Cybernetics 5 to plug in the +5 implants. So the fact that that was one of the really high injected skills within the group and around Citadel suggests to me that people are jumping on the SP trading market as well. So again, they will have liquidated Plex to get into that.
Yeah, and I think I think a lot of people are trying to get the +5s into their characters to maximize their ISK per month from the character trading. But I'm also seeing that when you look at the Plex prices, people are not doing the usual 0.01ing or anything like that. They're undercutting by 2 million, 4 million on each Plex. So that's, of course, putting a bigger downward pressure on it than you would normally see.
So that's the part I kind of find interesting, is that for your bigger institutional guys, and I was talking about this on the This Week in New Eden show, that the reason you like Plex if you have more than 10 billion ISK to hold is that you can change Plex into cash and cash into Plex extremely quickly. And the fact that there's been this historical growth curve is just gravy on top of it, right? You've been able to store it, basically get interest on it for being in storage, and then cash it out. And this sort of knowledge has trickled down to the baselines where they're trying to work with 1 or 2 billion ISK and sit on maybe 4 or 5 plexes in reserve of their own. Because if you were a plexer anyway, there have been a bunch of chances where you're like, man, Plex is 1.3 billion. That's freaking absurd. I'm not paying 1.3. And instead you're like, okay, well, I'll stock up at 1.1 and I'll stock up at maybe 1.0. For those guys, it gets really scary because now you've taken what was a hedge against high Plex prices, and you're eating shoe because the Plex price keeps falling, and that is an extremely hard pill to swallow when you're talking about these 10% up or down swings really making a major difference in how you play the game and how much effort it is to keep playing the game to just keep your login going, I think.
And I think it's a healthy thing, right? Because, well, I've been thinking a bit about what could the new storage of value be, and I keep ending up with if someone created a proper composed hedge fund or something like that with all the holes in the game, I think holes is where you would store your value for the future. Of course, some utility-wise will go down, but a lot of them will go up, or at least keep trickling up, because what Citadels is bringing in seems to be more destruction in the destruction and production cycle. And I'm suspecting that there's going to be tweaks to actually create more strain on the industry side. So things like building times and stuff like that. So not only do you get the raw materials going up, you also get the strain between raw materials and end product through industry, because there's going to be more strain on production. So one person can't actually just chain produce all the battleships for the entire world of Eve.
Well, and the only problem there is that nothing has the carrying capacity the way Plex does. Like, you can wash 1 trillion ISK into cash with Plex. You probably shouldn't, but you could, because there's enough business in a day that's not you wouldn't be taking over the entire market. Whereas a diversified portfolio is absolutely correct. Like, I totally agree with you and would love to go build one of those coming up here soon. It's just that the sort of ISK liquidity that you get from that, like, if you split up the market by net traded every day, it turns out that like 50% of it is everything, and then 50% of it is just RMT stuff. So your Plex, your skill trade, your everything else that has to do with the RMT fountains and that whole side of the game. And you then have to invest in thousands of items rather than 2 like you can in Plex or skill trading.
Yeah, but it doesn't really matter what you're selling off and making your profit on if you have a portfolio like that. It doesn't matter what the flavor of the month is. It's just what your return of investment is going to be and what's going to be the dividend payout each month, right? And I think it's going to be better than Plex.
Oh, absolutely. The fact that there's actually volatility in the other markets, like for all of the hemming and hawing about Plex, oh god, it's down or it's up or it's whatever, it moves very slowly. We see it move in large cycles, and because like this big event, it might take a week to go up and it might take a week to go down or a month to go make any major movement. Whereas in a lot of the other markets, like we saw with World War B, a ton of wonderful action in the material markets as people were liquidating stockpiles or fire sailing their equipment or what have you. And this volatility means there is a ton of opportunity to just play between the peaks and valleys for returns. It's just that for that kind of operation, you're talking about sinking a large amount of ISK and taking a long time to wash it out, as opposed to with Plex is essentially like buying gold bullion. You stick it in a safe, and when you need it, you take the gold bullion to the bank and you get your cash back out. It's a fundamentally different transaction.
But I think the gold-backed economy is about to fall through the floor. But that's again something that we can go into detail with. I would really like to hear some more details on how farming is going to be a factor in the future. And I think Marsha might have some numbers, because I was confused that it's not been doing what I was expecting. I was expecting a lot more inverse dependencies between Plex and injectors and extractors, and of course extractors will keep tanking because that's basically something that just goes in on that side. But I don't understand why you don't see the periodicity and the inverse link that I had expected, especially because isn't now the first real harvest season?
Depends when you actually started farming. I mean, the character traders that I spoke to that were already sat on dozens of characters were able to start farming straight away. There was also the first month where people were just gutting their own alts and re-injecting wherever they wanted and then selling off excess SP. So obviously we saw massive volume in the first few weeks, and then it started to tail off, and then it picked up again because of the war, because of people injecting there. And I think there was a new bro rush, especially from like Pandemic Horde, who just went and cleared out the market a couple of weekends, and then it settled again, and now we're starting to see the movement on Plex. Obviously Plex has dropped a lot, but we were just talking earlier about the prices, and I mean the highest I saw extractors go was 245 on sell, and maybe 250, and now they're down to about 219. I think that's what we noted down earlier, and the highest the injectors were at about 645. They did jump up at one point above 700, and that really quickly got filled. But now they're still not dropped that far. They're at just under 600, which is not, that doesn't correlate with Plex drops. But as we were discussing earlier at length, and I won't go into it too far, with this kind of market, the Plex price now is not reflected in the injectors or the extractors. It'll be reflected whenever the next extract point is done by the person. So if they inject a Plex into an account today, they're not going to extract that SP for another 7 days. So you're always going to be looking at historical values. So there might be a little bit of confusion there in the market as well, while people get used to it.
Yeah, because a lot of people seem to be reacting on the instant value, the current day value stuff, and there's a lot of professionals that seem to be doing this on an accounting and budgeting method, where they're actually planning ahead and saying, well, when extractors are cheap, I'm going to stock up on my extractors, and when injectors are expensive, I'm going to sell off my overstock, and when Plex is cheap, I'm going to buy it so I can Plex my account. But it seems as if the market is overflooded with people that don't do proper accounting, so you get these weird jitters and volatility that I had not expected. I'd expected a lot more proper accounting pros in the skill point farming.
Yeah, the interesting thing that keeps getting me is that so we see the extractor and Plex markets stay nice and tight together. Like if you just assume that that extractors are getting bought up at the 800 ARM price, then Plex and extractors are basically lockstep with each other, which is great news if you're a farmer, because then you just say, oh well, Plex prices are low right now, I'll stock up on all the material to feed my farm, and then if I'm going to spoil this too far, I guess I could cut it out, is that come the fall, when we see a lot of the actions start picking up again, that rising tide will mean that the harvest of all those skill points I generated is going to pay itself back. I think that there's still, though, this industrial. So I've talked at length, and we were talking pre-show about that the industrial mindset of Eve is centered around spreadsheets, and spreadsheets only ever give you a now snapshot of what the prices are. And so every time I've built one of these predictions, and every time I've plotted up one of these plots, I've always assumed that people I assume the worst in people, in that they are just looking at the now price, as opposed to doing the proper accounting thing and understanding that, well, I buy this Plex now, and that Plex has to last this long, and that means that every skill point I generate is going to be at this point until all of those Plex are consumed, and when I extract them, that means that I have this, all of these costs at this level, which means that my actual profit per unit will be this, because I sell later than I actually supplied for. And the skill point market is an especially long game. So you start hopefully seeing more of the people who do like jump freighters and understand that I have, you have to make your bet for 45 days as opposed to 7 or 2, the way that low end industrialists might be just looking at the price of Trit and being like, oh, this is what this costs, even though they may get screwed because Trit dumped and the price therefore just followed it into the dump.
I think some of the things that Marsha and I have been talking about is the whole thing about accounting and accounting tools. There's a lot of tools in EVE, but they're not biased towards actual accounting. And this might be why we are seeing this strange phenomenon where players love Plex and they love ISK. And they love those more as a metric for everything, but they don't do anything regarding their actual full NAV. They don't calculate the proper budgets. They don't look at the period of creating profit. And that might tie back to one of the things that I actually don't like to admit, but CCP has been saying that EVE players are not mature enough for proper corporation-run businesses and shares. And this might actually confirm that but then again, we don't have the tools. So again, it ties back to the whole catch-22. If we don't have the tools, we can't create the corporations and the businesses and publicly paid out dividends from the profits. So it's an oxymoron, really.
I think it's something that character traders are perhaps, like experienced character traders, are more aware of, because if you say, for argument's sake, you were buying characters from the bazaar, and then you were putting them on an account, training for 6 months, and then reselling, or just for however long, you knew that you'd bought at a particular price, and you knew that you'd plexed at a particular value, and then you come to sell the character, and you were attempting to sell it at current plex values, which, in general, for the last couple of years, have been on an upward trend. Whereas now that things are on a downward trend, it shifts things about. So for the people that are SP farming that have been doing this in the past, we always treated it as leveraging. You were putting your plex in, and then you were waiting for it to increase in value, not just earning SP, but actually earning profit on the plex value for the account. Whereas, as I say, these people that come in that are sort of, they're not that experienced with trading. They're looking at instant values. They'll buy a plex, and then they'll come back a month later and they'll extract a whole month's worth of SP and then try to sell it and then buy a new plex and be calculating the value off the wrong period. It is definitely an accounting thing.
I think as well something that is very overlooked is the actual volume of skill injectors traded. I mean, there's approximately 6,000 traded a day, which is 180,000 a month. And if each character that's training can get 3.9 per month, then you need 46,000 characters a month to produce the number of injectors that are needed every month in JITA at the moment.
I'm not getting the impression there's anywhere near that many people farming as yet. I think there will, but I think it'll take a good 6 months to come into effect. By that point, I would imagine nearly everybody in game who plexes will be on the bandwagon, and then it will crash to just, a couple of 100 million. Perhaps. We'll have to see how things go. Predictions can be wrong.
Yeah, and to any of the younger, less experienced trading people who want to go make the big chunk of money, I really do gotta say, getting really serious about accounting changed the way I played from being good enough to make some profit and have some money back and keep the lights on to making a truckload of money, because I was really thinking about, okay, what are the inputs? What are the outputs? How is this going? We went from a 10 billion a week production farm to a 60 billion a week production farm, because we were able to say, okay, where are the costs going? Is this actually the best thing? Are we able to use our stockpiles and leverage them instead of just throwing cash down the drain into stockpile stuff we almost never use? And getting really, really good at that changed the way I traded and worked, and made just leaps and bounds difference. So if you're having trouble getting over that hump, I really got to say, go pick up some accounting know-how.
I think the one that I noticed the most, actually, as an industrialist, not as a trader, is people putting up things like POS, not taking into account the value of the POS. I mean, it is a fixed asset, so you have to budget for it. And then not taking into account things like fuel. They just write it off. It's just a hobby. So therefore I don't need to take this into account. Well, actually you do. It's a running cost. Of course you need to take your fuel into account. And if you don't, then you're overestimating your profits. So there are industrialists out there that are running at a loss. And their argument is, well, I'm just doing it as a hobby. I was like, well, why don't you just give people money away? If you really If you're going
Yeah,
to do that.
they are bleeding ISK, and it's because they're not doing any of their overheads at all.
And furthermore, if you really get into some of the dirtier bits of it, and like for instance, what I ended up doing was I rejiggered my accounting so I could see week over week whether I was making progress, whether I was getting better. And this is because as a markety person, like I like seeing numbers go up, and that like. The fact that I could sit there and go, well, man, I've been producing this item for months, and I'm only making this much after I do all the stuff, and I'm logging every day for that. When my other characters B, C, and D are making 4 times that, and I still can move every piece of item. Why the heck aren't characters A and B doing the same thing as D, C, and E? Like being able to really look at and quantify everything really went from. Like, oh, we just churn out things and we make money and we get everybody paid and we're all bros, to no, we're getting space rich and we're making real investments and we're expanding into new markets and we understand our mechanics and we are attacking things. Like the thing that really got me was that once I finally understood how to use decryptors properly, I was one of the few people who could really jump into the interceptor and bomber market and bring 200, 300 bombers a go to bear, where all of the other producers are doing them in batches of 6 and 7. Like when the market needs 100 of something, there I was to give the baseload demand, as opposed to just sort of getting a few on top of there and making, a couple 100 million-esque or something. I was making tens of billions.
And this is where I would actually like to do a little plug on the CCP Please thing, because if you consider what you just mentioned about industry, one of the things that's been a problem is that that CCP has put the hard limit on the skills, right? So you can have a chain running with 10 bombers, or you can have 305 market orders. That hard limit should not be on skills. It should be in diminishing returns in the market, and it should be on time limits and broker fees and market indexes and stuff like that. So people actually need to consider what are they doing and where are they doing it. So you should not be able to produce all the bombers for this month of Eve. That makes no sense, right?
It was more that
there should be a limit that makes sense compared to the utility in the game, and that's why I would hope that with Citadels, we might start moving away from skill hard limits and into actual free markets.
Well, and I mean, the backup on my thing was that I had just understood the mechanics to be able to deliver and clean up some of the bottlenecks along the way. So, like, if you were looking at it straight line and you said, I build my components and I use my invention and I might use a decryptor. There are a whole bunch of traps in there that keep you out of some of the higher volume stuff, where you say, well, material efficiency is king, so why would I use a decryptor that makes less efficiency, and not understanding that more net return is better than a higher percentage return. 2, that augmenting the actual the component build so that I wasn't doing all of them internally meant that I could produce more per unit time because I had rejiggered my particular chain. And so it had basically ramped up to the very maximum out yield you could get per character because I had gone and rebalanced the things. And that's what I want to see is an industry, a need to have an expert who actually can balance all that stuff, so that like the times are so long because you need to go do the things or the fees get in your way. These are places I want to see.
I was just trying to tie it back to the accounting thing, right? Because when you want to do your things in industry, right, you should not have these limitations. You should be able to have your own end marginal cost. It shouldn't be something that's hard code limited. When you buy your materials, how you source your stuff, right, that's going to show up in your spreadsheets on your budget, telling you your marginal cost when you build these bombers was this. That generates this profit margin, and it's going to generate this end profit, and that's your profit. It might not be the same as your neighbor or someone building in exactly the same system. It's all about bringing in some proper competition that's not going to be this EFT warrior stuff, but being ecology and social interaction based.
Yeah, also if you really want to profit with industry, it's not a solo job. And when you build your spreadsheet, if you sit there and say, I'm going to do it from the start to the end, and I'm going to kill myself doing it, then you're being a bit stupid, really, because the key to actually upscaling is to outsource particular parts of the chain and get somebody else to do it free, or as close to free as you can. You know, silly things like copying BPCs. If you're doing T2 invention, you can pass that to somebody else, and you can pay them minimal fees. They'll do it. Or hauling, outsource your hauling, because it's the stuff like this where you need to be maximising your risk per hour in terms of activity. And this is why things like Plex trading and character trading are so attractive to long-term players, particularly because we've done all the hard work in the early years, we've done really long industrial chains, but actually we don't want to have to log in and spend 3 or 4 hours a night clicking. It's not for everybody. So you minimise it so that you're doing like 20 minutes a week and your risk is in the billions per minute.
And this ties into the next topic that you put on the list, right, with the whole offshoring and the story about what citadels market-wise are going to do, the tax havens and the whole perimeter papers, right? That now we're going to have the option to trade in citadels and compete with NPC pricings. And I think this might actually expand out to more than just markets. I think it's going to be eventually the same with industry and all these things. I think there's a fairly decent plan at work in CCP that we might not just be privy to yet.
I think I should probably explain the offshoring that Caleb was referring to.
Yeah, go for it.
Basically, offshoring in regards to citadels means that if someone puts a citadel up in near Banan, for example, one jump out of Jita, and they set their broker fees at 0% because they're really nice people, I can fly out there in my pod, sit in the citadel and place a one jump buy order, which will cover Jita 4-4. And the broker fee that I will pay on that buy order is set in the citadel or in the place that it originates. So I will pay 0% broker fee on my buy order, which is actually taking place inside Jita 4-4. So then when I get goods sold to me in Jita 4-4, I can flip them and sell them in the station. And of course I pay the broker fee that side, but I've just saved myself, in my case, 2.5% on the broker fee.
Did you get confirmation that that's actually intended gameplay?
The thing is that it works the same way that ranged buy orders work now. If I set a region buy order, it is set. The broker fee is set at the place of that it originates from. And the thing is that in order to change this, there would be two ways that if CCP didn't want this to happen, then number one would be to say that the broker fee is applied at every station that your order hits. And that would be a nightmare to calculate, and people would be really angry about that. And the other way to do it would be to say that the broker fee is paid when your order is filled at the fee on the station that it's filled at. So say I was sitting in a citadel and I had a buy order out somewhere, and my buy order hits somewhere that I'm -10 at, then when the order sells to me, it would charge me the fee. But again, that isn't feasible because you would have no way of knowing in advance what's going to get sold to you at what station. And so you could have broker fees ranging from 2% to 4% on your orders coming in. So it's just a side effect of how the actual range buy orders work at the moment.
And we already had some hints that there was going to be quite a lot of maybe not bugs, but at least unintended effects from starting all this Citadel market stuff. So I'm suspecting that there's going to be a lot of number crunching and looking at actually fixing this, because I don't think that what we are getting now, and at least not what we're seeing on CC, is exactly as it's intended. There's a few things that are really problematic, like with visibility and the fact that you can get orders locked up in the Citadel you don't have access to, and it doesn't actually cancel it, it just makes it invisible, and all these manner of things. So definitely I am expecting that the next 3 months is going to be CCP looking at fixing market features. And maybe, just maybe, they will get around to fixing some of the things that's been broken for 10 years.
I mean, I would say that it's important to differentiate. I can sit in a Citadel and place a remote order from one station. So I can say, select the buy station that I want to carry my order. And if I do that, say I sit in near Banon and I place a remote buy order, I select JITA as the station to host my order, then I will pay the JITA fees. But if I place a 1 jump range buy order to cover all stations within a 1 jump range, then I only pay the broker fee that the Citadel owner has set.
To be fair, I think if there's a desire from CCP to see these market hubs, they're not necessarily secondary or tertiary hubs, but to see changes in behaviour, I suspect they might leave that in. And another thing that we were looking at not so long ago was asset safety. At this point, because you can trigger asset safety in HiSec with no fee, as far as I remember, to like another station in system or another Citadel if you have access to it. Even if that Citadel gets hit and you've got loads of stock in there, you can just trigger asset safety and it's there. So I mean, there's actually no reason not to take up these new trade hubs that are opening up.
It's worse than that, if I'm not mistaken. If you are denied access to the Citadel, you can actually trigger asset safety. So you're going to get some sort of emergent gameplay where players might actually start using it for interbus services.
It's a 5-day delay on delivery in the same system. It's actually free, but you have to wait 5 days. One of the problems is that if you set up a range buy from the Citadel and the owner decides to revoke your access, your buy order will no longer be visible outside the Citadel, but it will still be able to be sold to from inside the Citadel. So your buy order can be filled with items that you can't actually collect or relist on the market. So then you have to trigger asset safety and wait 5 days to get your items.
Yeah, that's the ghost order thing where you are not actually able. You can see your order in your wallet, but you can't see it on the actual market because you've been denied access to the Citadel. But it's still working in the Citadel that you've now been denied access to, just not outside it.
The only bug that I can see at the moment, though, that might hold things up is you can't redeem items in Citadels. So I noticed somebody commenting on this today. It's like, Plexes, we're not really not going to move them, even if we can. We really do need to be able to redeem them, and that's probably what will be the basis for a lot of markets if Plexes start being cheaper in Citadels. So that needs to be fixed. But, I mean, like, as soon as the first larges go up and access goes up to them, I'm going to seed them. Because I just don't see that there's any way you can lose out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to probably sit in the one in Perimeter that's going up, just to test out the 0% fees out to JITA. And it only costs 700 million a month to run a market hub in a Citadel, so yeah, it's not like it's super expensive to keep it running.
It will be very interesting to see what the margins actually look like, because as soon as the patch went out, so up to now, we're only starting to see the first Citadels finally get launched and not get automatically destroyed. So we've seen the margins basically creep out to the 4% flat fee that the taxes have been changed to, and I'll be really interested to see if since Citadels don't have visibility into API feeds, if we'll end up seeing the reported margins start to either widen or shrink because people have to fight with Citadel prices that are going to be ghosted according to the tools.
Well, this is something that I wanted to mention earlier as well. Another sort of trigger for Plex price changes might be that people who are in alliances in nullsec or lowsec, or even in wormholes, have had discussions with their alliance leaders who've said, right, we're going to put a large up and we're going to put a market in it, and it'll just be for us, which has been a desire for a lot of groups for a long time. You know, they want to be able to sell internally, and we'll set the tax at this, and we want you to come and seed it, the broker fee. So they'll have sort of like looked and thought, oh, I've got 10, 20 billion in plexes, I could seed stuff. You know, all I have to do is go buy stuff and ferry it out to wherever. I could trigger asset safety if need be, blah, blah, blah. I can mark it up. They might have said you can mark it up to a maximum of 10, 15%, which is a pretty good chunk. You know, market seeding in low sec and null sec's actually really profitable, and you don't really have to do that much with it. And it's low competition. So if those people have all sort of, across the game, had these conversations at alliance level, they may well be liquidating the Plex to actually start raiding the Jita market as the Walmart it is, and then going out and seeding local hubs. So the movement of goods is starting to change a little bit as well.
Yeah, I'm going to be really interested
healthy
to see if ISK velocity continues to stay high because of that. Like, it's hard to say that Jita will not see the same, like the actual orders going through Jita might wane and ebb and flow, but the total ISK velocity moving through the game and people trading things and actively doing work is going to be the really interesting part.
Yeah, but it's the negative. It's the cross thing that you got between picking up stuff in Jita or buying it directly from market, and then of course the benefit from Citadels having potentially a lot lower taxes and broker fees. So you're going to eventually, I think, see that the huge volumes that are currently in the hubs will be at least partially distributed out elsewhere. Not necessarily the big asset holders, but they don't even have them on market. They usually have them in their hangars.
I think that as well, a lot of people are expecting people in Citadels to undercut Jita because of their lower tax fees, whereas I think that what will happen is people will just make larger profits per item. So Jita will still be the cash and carry, and everywhere else, as it is now, everywhere else is just marked up from Jita.
There's one piece of behaviour as well that keeps being touted as a bug, like, you've released Citadels and they're not really finished. Contracts not being available in Citadels right now. I mean, they are working on it, but it's something that's been a particular bugbear of mine the whole time I've been in nullsec and lowsec. Because when I started and I went to nullsec in like 2009, we seeded local markets with full fits, and this was before you had shared fittings, and it was really before people had standardised doctrines as well. So we made money, we seeded the markets, we pushed them down manually, we did ask lead not to intervene, but obviously if people were buying things at like 40% markup, they did, and you'd get told off. And what's shifted in the last sort of 5 or 6 years is that people have switched to contracts, and they'll put a full doctrine fit up on contracts, which means that in alliances you've got a handful of people who will sink like 100, 200 billion into the market. They're not actually seeding the local market because they're scared of people coming in and buying and relisting key items, which is stupid because you can actually hold those key items in reserve as well to stop that from happening. So now that there's going to be a gap where Citadels will go up in nullsec and they will go up in lowsec and they're for local sort of stocking, I'm hoping that they break out of this contract mentality and go back to seeding on the market because it opens it up to far more people.
Yeah, I think that would be nice.
Contract market. So the contract markets where I've made a good chunk of my change was we always treated that as a convenience luxury market, that it was a tactical asset because you could push button and receive bacon, and that still I think needs to be there just because there are people who have more money than time, and I'm more than happy to part my time for their money kind of thing.
Well, not with multi-buy. I mean, there's multi-buy now and there's shared fittings, and I really do think nullsec players in particular have just become lazy, and it's impacted their local markets as well, because after the price changes they were trying to push people effectively into nullsec and create more complex markets, and it failed. They actually said after a few months the behaviour we expected hasn't happened, and it's because people have become lazy. They can just go to Jita, you send one person for the alliance that goes and buys 100 billion worth of stuff, brings it, sometimes they're marking it like 40-50% up as well on contracts, so it is a real rip-off, and it throttles the local market because nobody seeds it, and it means that when you restage as well, you've got this huge stock to move, which is a nightmare, whereas 100 people seeding the market competitively actually drive the price down, and they're all making a little bit of profit.
And then the Citadel owner will be making different markups on different taxes because you can set them differently, right? So competition-wise and boycott and embargo-wise, there's so many new options, and I think Marsha is actually completely right. Contracts is a habitual problem. They're going to move away from it, and the period that we get between markets being available and contracts being introduced into Citadels is going to make people change their behavior and figure out the workaround so they don't actually need those contract mechanics.
I think one of the big changes to Null will also be that hostile listing is going away with Citadels. At the moment you can be a neutral trader and you don't need to be able to dock at a outpost or a station to be able to list items there on the market. And that's going to change with Citadels. So I think that will make a difference to more people than we realise down in Null.
I actually saw a complaint pop up on Reddit, and they were like, this is a deal breaker that contracts are not available because people can just come in. Despite the fact that these are closed markets, they can put spy alts in, and they can just buy all, they just have to buy all the ammo from a particular doctrine fit. And I looked at it and thought, come off it. We've all been in corps. If your corp is well run, they should be keeping a stock of certain key items so that if that does happen, they can pass it out. The traders should have reserve stock. You don't have to put 100% of everything you've got up. So even if you do get a spy come in and they actually burn the spy to start manipulating the market, which everybody's going to see, so they've got a really short window to do it, so what? You've got reserve stock.
Exactly, you're back at the whole stock control, accounting, and all these topics that we already touched upon. It's just a matter of time before people adapt.
So I got to time check us because this is amazing, but like I said, we can go on forever. I want to go ahead and start moving us towards the end here and talk about what you guys are going to be doing for the next month or so until we do the next show, just to sort of prime the pump for what we think is going to happen, what we're going to try and do to make that happen. Not too many spoilers, of course.
And we do that backwards this time, right? So Marsha goes first?
Yeah, let's do Marsha first.
All right, well, I've been out of Indy for quite a while. I'm just sort of passively station trading and doing my character SP trading and stuff like that. But I've got quite a bit of liquidity now because of stripping a lot of alts. And obviously I've got quite a big industrial corp that I've not used for a long time. I was waiting for the industrial structures, but I think actually I'm going to jump in somewhere and do something with them. And it may well be that I repurpose all my farm as well to be copiers and researchers, because the more you have, the more you can do. Even if it's just copying for the time being to do big batch inventions later on. So hopefully in a few weeks I should have more up-to-date industry sort of things to talk about.
Yep, I'm going to be just carrying on writing the modules that have come out and until that market settles down. I'm also going to try out the offshoring in Citadels when they come up. So yeah, that'll be fun to talk about next time.
I think I might actually be a little bit busy because I have a lot of meta stuff to do, but the things that I'm looking at investing in is still just hoarding the things from the halls where people have not been looking yet, that still have all the old prices. And then I'm going to be following very closely what the CCP devs are writing and saying in all their channels and social outlets, because I think there's some things that they might have been keeping a little bit under wraps.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. Unfortunately, I'm going to be working on my own meta stuff, dev fleet stuff, to try and get more Prosper stuff up and running for you guys. Like I said on my show, we're going to be heading into hiatus over the summer, and I want to be able to bring more of the technical tools to more of the people, so that more people can participate at this absurd level like we do, because it sure is a lot of fun. So with that, do you guys have any other extra shout outs, any other pimping, any more news you want to share before we wrap this up?
Well, I would like to just pimp one little thing, and I know I've been doing it a lot, but one of the things that I really like to see developing at the moment is what Veronica is doing with mobile, because he's basically trying to give us some of the tools that are needed to do these things that we're talking about without needing a higher degree or PhD in spreadsheeting. So go check that out and play around with it a little bit and see if you can't get things to fit.
I'll pimp out Tweet Fleet Slack, because there's a lot of people sat in there in various channels, and it's a really useful place. Also scc-lounge in game and in Slack. Can't think of anything else. I've been quite enjoying watching various streams, like Locks, although I've only caught a few of them, and also the one with Wiggles and Dirt McGurk. That's quite good. Can't remember what it's called.
Yep, I'll just echo Marsha and say, yeah, just come out and hang out in the lounge in game or in Slack. It's just basically for anyone who's interested in trading, whether you've got 5,000 ISK or a trillion ISK, just come out and hang out with us.
Excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and close up this meeting of the Blue Horseshoe Club, if I may be so lame. We should be back in about a month with another one of these shows. We're going to see about maybe doing some other content as well, but we gotta see how time and schedules work out and get more of this out. If you guys want to give us feedback, send it back to Lockefox in-game, or drop by the scc-lounge channel in Slack or in-game, and we will collect things there. I will have Twitters and such up for our next show because I'm just not prepared. So thank you again to our guests, Caleb Ayrania, Marsha Mallow, and Rhivre. We're going to be back again. I hope you guys all enjoyed.